As someone who played the original House Flipper to death, testing out House Flipper 2 was always a given. But how does it run on the Steam Deck? Let's find out. The first thing you want to do before anything else is turn off FSR. For some reason, loading into House Flipper 2 on the Steam Deck results in some seriously ugly, blurry visuals. It feels like it's taken FSR and multiplied it by 10. It is fixable though. The moment I turned FSR off and back on again, the visuals went back to looking normal, thankfully. I won't sugarcoat it. Performance across the board is a mixed bag, but it's not problematic. The game uses the full range of 30 to 60 frames per second. I averaged around 42 frames during my testing and it's not steady. Outdoor areas cause the biggest frame drops, as does running, and walking for that matter. Basically, almost everything can cause frame drops. If you sit staring at the frame counter, you'll see it fluctuates constantly. How much of a problem is that? Normally with other games, this level of constant change would result in a shaky mess. But somehow, House Flipper 2 doesn't feel like it's struggling to keep up. When you drop from 55 to 30, that's felt. But the drops are often in incremental changes, so they're rarely felt to any major degree. One helpful tip I have, if you do find yourself getting motion sick, open the Steam Deck's quick access menu, that's the ... button, and lock the frame rate to 30. You can do that in-game as well. Most owners will agree that 30 frames per second on a Steam Deck feels very similar to 60 frames per second on a big screen. The smaller the screen, the fewer frames you need for a good experience. Moving on, as with the original game, using the sledgehammer to decimate walls causes the frame rate to plummet to well below 30. This is understandable though. When you're breaking something into multiple pieces and removing sections of the game world, it's going to take a toll on the CPU or GPU, so I get it. And, if I'm being honest, the slowdown kind of adds to the feeling of destruction. If the game didn't recover quickly, it would be an issue worth keeping in mind, but as it rights itself fast, I don't think it's enough of a problem to complain about. One area of concern is GPU throttling. The usage percentage fluctuates as much as the frame rate. Every half a second or so, the usage switches from the 80s into the 90s. Sometimes it's the middle of the 90s, other times it's the full 99%. That's concerning to say the least, and I'm hoping more Steam Deck optimizations are coming, as I've never seen a game react like this. The bottom line is this: performance isn't solid, but it's more than playable. If you come to House Flipper 2 expecting a smooth 60 frames per second, then you'll be disappointed. If, however, you know 30 frames per second is perfectly playable on the Steam Deck, you'll be pleasantly surprised by how well put together this game is. It not only works, it's playable with minimal tinkering. I'll tell you this right now, there isn't going to be a best overall settings for everyone. Everyone's going to have their own opinion on this. That's because your choice here is either blurred visuals with a steady frame rate that rarely dips below 30, or great visuals with dips into the high 20s. The settings I'm about to run through will keep the frame rate above 30 for the most part, but the trade-off is textures look a little blurry and the edges aren't quite as smooth. If you prefer a solid frame rate, these are the settings you want. Your aspect ratio should default to 16:10. If it doesn't, change that now. Screen resolution, we're going to go with 1152 by 720 because we're going to be using FSR to upscale the resolution further in a second. VSync set to off. Frame rate limiter you can set to either 60 or 30. If you want smoothest, 30, otherwise go for 60 for the areas where it can go above 30. For your dynamic resolution mode, you want to select FSR. For the FSR mode itself, set that to quality. Anti-aliasing, you want TAA. Then the TAA quality, I've got it to high, but you can go to medium if you want a few extra frames. For texture resolution, set that to a quarter. Shadow quality low, shadow distance low, ambient occlusion quality low, motion blur, that should always be off, bloom low, and don't even think about screen space reflections. In the Steam Deck quick access menu, you want to set the TDP to 12. 10 is fine and will get you more juice, but I found the extra frames that come with 12 is worth the trade-off. You also want to make sure that FSR is turned to off in the quick access menu, as that will mess around with the in-game version of FSR. Now let's talk about the alternative options you've got. For me, I don't have a problem with the game dipping into the high 20s on the Steam Deck. If this were a first-person shooter, sure, that would be a problem. But as the player character in House Flipper 2 is stationary a lot of the time, it's less of a problem, and the increase in visuals really help the game to shine. If that sounds like you, turn off FSR and crank the texture resolution all the way up to full. It's imperfect, but I think it's still very enjoyable. If you want, you can also set a frame rate cap in the settings menu, but I didn't feel like that was needed. Moving on to bugs, there are some minor bugs in House Flipper 2, but not enough that I'd recommend against playing or waiting for a patch. it's fine. The most noticeable one is how sometimes when you bring up the in-game selection wheel, you need to press A to select it rather than just releasing the analog stick. It's a minor annoyance, but it's something it's safe to say will most likely be fixed at a later date. In some ways, it's hard not to feel a little shortchanged by House Flipper 2. Coming from the first game with all the downloadable content, House Flipper 2 feels kind of empty by comparison. But then the flip side of that is developers Frozen Distic and Empyrean have been good with post-release support for the first game. There's always the chance we'll get new homes and missions to bridge the gap to be closer to the first one as time goes on. Overall though, I've had a blast with House Flipper 2. The visuals have seen a massive upgrade. Even anti-aliasing is now under control. Texture qualities feel cleaner, and having the lights turned on doesn't kill the frame rate anymore. It is essentially everything I could have wanted from a sequel. I will admit that the Steam Deck version does need some more optimization work. I'd say this is a good start, but that fluctuating GPU usage leaves me feeling a little uneasy. Should you buy it now or wait for a price drop? Given how strong performance is on the Steam Deck, and despite the game having only just been released, if you're a fan of House Flipper and want more of the same but with killer new graphics, House Flipper 2 comes easy to recommend. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like, and if you'd like to subscribe, that'd be awesome. Until next time, see ya!